offered a position on Parler, 40% of their revenue, and declined it because they refused to ban anyone who criticizes him. He would only join it if they canceled everyone who was mean to him. Bear that in mind as we talk about this breaking news. The fact that his team has launched a new social media platform called Gitter, which obviously sounds like Twitter because it's just copying Twitter. It's just going to be a sad right-wing Twitter. Let's see, it's a non-bias social network for people all over the world. I don't understand why no one can say non-biased. I don't understand it, but that's what they say on the App Store. It's rated M for mature, meaning it's recommended for users 17 and older. And I don't know exactly why. I will say that in the promotional materials I saw, all of the profiles that were shown were very attractive young women. You know what you think of when you think of a Trump rally attendee or whatever. No, it's designed to get young white conservatives to sign up for Getter, thinking that there's all these young attractive women that just want to talk about the Second Amendment or COVID being a bioweapon. I don't know. But so supposedly that's starting up. It's gonna try to compete with Twitter. Adrian, what do you think?
Well, I do love how essentially they're using all these photos of attractive young women because essentially they're trying to lure in all of these incels, and it's really gonna end up being just a big online social media sausage factory of hate. And so it's kind of like, great, if you want to go full depth 4chan but put a Trump on it, sure, that sounds like a good way to go. I do not think it's gonna rival Twitter in any way. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets dropped by Apple and other outlets such as Parler did. But it's like Trump is gonna Trump. He really is.
Yeah, like so they're saying it's gonna fight cancel culture. Again, stupid narrative. They love canceling people. Gwen Berry literally has to be taken out of the Olympics because she turned her back on a flag. These are the people that hate cancel culture. Okay, so it defends free speech, stops cancel culture, creates a true marketplace of ideas. Okay, so Parler, which was designed to do literally the exact same thing, rampantly banned leftists, like trying to clear it out because the right wingers couldn't take it. They say they want it to be an opening marketplace of ideas. They don't. They want it to be a safe space for right-wing ideas. That's all they want. And eventually they had to start banning people who were advocating for violence and crimes and terrorism. So when that happens on Gitter, which it definitely is going to, because that's who they're trying to appeal to, what are they gonna do? Are they going to cancel those accounts or are they gonna leave them in and likely, like Parler, as Adrian pointed out, get pulled from app stores? Gitter, you better prepare for this because it's only like a month away. If you're actually lucky enough to get people to sign on, and if this doesn't get immediately canceled like Trump's blog was, you're going to have that issue. So what are you going to do when people are spreading COVID misinformation and they're advocating for the murder of their political rivals? Are you gonna leave those accounts up or not? Adrian, what path do you think they're gonna take?
Oh, I think they're probably gonna leave the accounts up and try to fight it in some way. I do think that this is essentially gonna create a new department in like the FBI. So they're gonna have to be monitoring everything that goes on here. That it's just gonna be a conglomeration of hate speech and all sorts of things that threaten our nation. So I can't see it being alive for very long. But you never know, maybe the government will let it stay up because it's like, hey, at least we know where they are and they're all in one place.
That's true. It is convenient, as Parler proved to be. By the way, Ham Salad Dragon says, I'm gonna start a coffee review app called Jitter. That's good. See, I like that. I would go to that one. Anyway, we are unfortunately running out of time. So I want to thank you, Adrian, for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Today it was even more necessary than usual to have your expertise. So thank you for giving us your time. I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
And where can people watch more of your work?
TYT Overruled on the Rebel headquarters pages on Facebook and YouTube, as well as catch me on Twitter at Adrian Law and on Instagram at Adrian Lauren.
And definitely follow Adrian on Twitter because there's so much happening in the Supreme Court, stuff coming out from courts. It's very helpful to me, Adrian, to see your real-time analysis of it as you're like learning more, and it's very helpful. So I advise everyone to follow you. And thank you again. For those of you at home, thank you for watching. Do appreciate that. We've got an awesome interview coming up that'll be up on the channel a little bit later on today. Also want to remind you, tomorrow is garbage day. So I'm gonna be joined by Jeff Waldorf, who's gonna be helping me throw out some garbage. You can get involved in that process by going to the community tab of our YouTube channel and voting for the community garbage person of the day, which should be a lot of fun. So definitely go do that. And until next time, until I see you then, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and I'll see you soon.
You know what time it is. Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Ritchie. We have a lot on the agenda today. Let me give a big thank you to everyone who continues to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We set a goal for 100,000. We thought it would take months. It took 3 weeks. We exceeded 100,000 subscribers last Friday. We're now at 112,000 subscribers for this show. And last week we had over 2 million views because of you, all right? Because of you. And I want to say thank you for that. Today on the show, my co-host will be my dear sister, Malaika Jabali, senior news and politics editor at Essence. This is going to be an amazing show. Also, I got Dr. Pamela Gurley, author and social activist, to talk about her book, I'm Not a Stereotype. We're gonna get into some other issues in relationship to that book as well. And the bullpen, my debate guest will be Carrie Sheffield, senior fellow at Independent Women's Forum. And my wish a Karen would is a hell of a one. Let's get into my top story. Violence in Paterson, New Jersey. No, not by citizens, but by the police. A narrow apartment building. There's an officer having a back and forth with a young African-American male about him seeing his child. He's on his cell phone and he's talking aggressively on his cell phone, but he's not threatening anyone. He simply wants to see his children, according to the narrative. Well, this one police officer, he's being reasonable. He's trying to de-escalate, utilizing the training that he was given in situations like this. And then another cop shows up and decides to simply assault this black male. 44-year-old Spencer Finch has been with the department for 18 years. And his salary, ladies and gentlemen, is $106,736 a year. That's according to city records. According to Paterson Press, for more than 2 minutes, the officer, whose name has not been made public, stayed away from the agitated man, seemingly employing de-escalation techniques that were supposed to prevent physical confrontations between cops and citizens. But in a matter of moments, the tense situation erupted in violence. A scuffle, seemingly initiated by another police officer at the scene, who hit the father and later kneed the man in the face while he was sitting on the floor. Now, we know the identity of that cop. The reason why we know who this cop is because the mayor ordered the release of this footage. The mayor of the city said this was in an effort to remain transparent. About 2 weeks after the incident, the authorities arrested the other cop, 44-year-old Spencer Finch, an 18-year veteran with the police department, and charged him with assault, official misconduct, and trying to conceal his actions by filing a false police report. Well, you don't say. Here's some of that video.
Are you a father?
No, but
you're not a father. You don't understand, my nigga. Third time. This is the third time my kids have been taken from me.
It was a domestic disturbance report.
Yelling in the hole.
And that was Paterson, New Jersey police officer Spencer Finch.
Yelling in the hole.
Get the fuck out of here. Put your fucking hands on your wrist. Get the fuck out of here.
Paterson, you gave me a fucking chance, bro.
I gave him a chance to put his hands on me. I gave him a chance to put his hands on me.
We told you to chill out so we can solve the problem. That's it.
You didn't record him, hit me.
Please stop.
That's some bitch ass shit, bro. That's some bitch ass shit, my nigga.
Stop resisting, Brandon.
I'm not resisting, yo.
Just relax, please.
That's some bitch ass shit, yo.
Brandon, please relax.
Yo, you saw him punch me in my shit.
Turn around.
Relax.
You saw him punch me in my shit, dog.
With the man in handcuffs, Finch did this.
Look me in my eye, little nigga.
No, please stop.
Spencer Finch has now been suspended without pay and charged with 4 felonies: assault, possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, misconduct, and filing a false police report.
Now, who's the real criminal here? You see clearly one officer utilizing his training, trying to de-escalate. This is not a criminal issue. This was not even a criminal call. It was a civil dispute about children and custody and visitation, which could have easily been handled, except for the fact that this cop decided to be the thug that he is. Now, Paterson police, they have been in the spotlight for a while now because of police misconduct. Well, initially the authorities of this city said, well, this is because we have young officers. Well, these young officers have been on record for violating the constitutional rights of other people. They have been suspended, they have been fired, some of them have been charged. Well, you can't make the argument that this is just a young cop. This guy has been on the force for 18 years and he makes over $100,000 a year. And he is such a criminal that responding to a domestic civil dispute, he decides to act in a way that is criminal against an unarmed father with a cell phone in his hand. To talk about this story and a lot more, I got my dear sister, Jabali. Good day. Thank you for being on Indisputable.
Hi, Dr. Ritchie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Tell me how you see this scene.
I think this is yet another example of us needing to raise the question if cops make us safe. I actually worked on a piece on this for Essence magazine, as you mentioned. I am a newly appointed senior news and politics editor for Essence, and for our upcoming issue, we raise this question and we talk to abolitionists. And you make that point very clear yourself when you say that he is an 18-year veteran. And there are other veterans of the police force where if we are recommending these piecemeal reforms, or we say cops just need more training, they need to be more astute. They need to just be aware of what's wrong. They don't always know what's right and what's wrong, except he's been on the force for nearly 2 decades. And I actually, in my many lives, I did social work in Paterson, New Jersey. And this is a community that's ravaged by a lot of poverty. It was a center for industrialization in the region. It's kind of a part of that Rust Belt. And so a lot of jobs have left Paterson. So why are we investing so much in police to perpetuate harm? And this story applies to so many predominantly Black communities all over the country. We need to be making investments in communities and divesting from police officers.
And that's why the defund the police movement, I know some people criticize the branding of it. I agree with it. I think the branding of it helped bring the conversation to a different dimension in our public narrative. And it's not to get rid of cops, it's literally to reprioritize, to reimagine what policing is or can be. And I made this point many times on this show. If your city or county, if they are bragging about hiring more cops, then they are failing you, because all they're telling you is that they are unable, they are not equipped to deal with criminality in that community. And so they're simply throwing money at it, hiring more cops, and nobody has ever arrested themselves out of socioeconomic dysfunction. It has never happened. Chicago has more cops than in the history of its charter. Chicago is paying people more to be police officers than in the history of its charter. They have never had this many cops on the street, and they have more crime than ever before. The model simply does not work if you do not address the underlying issues to criminality in the first place. Crimes of survival, poverty related, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health disorders. And then you have out of control cops like this guy Finch, who decides to respond to an incident that's really a civil dispute. He takes control away from the officer that was doing it the right way and creates a criminal matter when there was no criminal matter at all.
Absolutely. I think we have to reassess whether the occasional safety that police officers provide, and mind you, police officers from studies solve only 2% of major crimes and 98% go unsolved. So is that occasional safety worth perpetual harm that these communities have been experiencing for decades, nearly a century?
You bring up that stat, and I remember when it came out, I talked about it heavily on my radio show, and I talked about it on this show as well. That was staggering to me, 2%. 2%. What other government office, what government department can have a 2% success rate? And by the way, the highest regionally was 11%. So at 11%, you're at the top of the food chain, and that's still at the bottom. So even if you're at the top of the top, you're at 11% solve rate as a police department. What government agency can have that kind of effectiveness or lack thereof and not be questioned by everybody who funds them?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. We're going to keep our eye on this story because obviously justice is not justice just because of the arrest. We've seen this happen time and time again. We saw a state trooper who murdered a guy in Georgia. That's my humble opinion. Shot a man in the state of Georgia and got arrested for felony murder. Got fired from the state troopers division, and then he got off on the grand jury. Everybody who investigated this, from the DA to internal affairs to the state trooper's office, they believe he committed murder of an unarmed black man inside of a car. But however this was presented to the grand jury, that is where he was exonerated for his actions. So the justice system is a system. It is not an incident or a one-time thing. Let me shift gears to Tucker Carlson. Man, this guy's something else. Now, I've already told you all, peep game on Tucker Carlson, okay? Here's what's really happening with Tucker. He is in a situation where somebody has some information on him. Now, I'm telling you now, I know what I'm talking about. I'm from Glenwood Road. He has some information out there on him that's embarrassing. He knows it's going to come out. He cannot stop it from coming out. Maybe it's connected to text messages, maybe it's connected to emails. So in order to mitigate the outcome, he pulled a Matt Gaetz. So what did his buddy Matt Gaetz do? Well, Matt Gaetz tried to make it about him being the victim of something. Well, the truth is he was just under investigation for trafficking underage girls, right? That's why he's under investigation. Now, I don't know what the there is for Tucker. I have no idea what it is, but it's big enough to where he decided to use his platform to get ahead of it. So now Tucker is claiming that the NSA, the freaking National Security Agency, not the FBI, not the Department of Justice, but literally an organization who by law cannot spy on domestic citizens. Now, I wondered why. I said, why did Tucker use the NSA as the agency after him? And I figured it out. The reason why he said the NSA was after him is because the NSA historically will not respond to accusations like that. The DOJ will, the FBI will, the state agencies will, but the NSA and the CIA typically will never respond to such an accusation. So he could have really gotten away with it without a response. However, the NSA decided to say, no, we are not targeting Tucker Carlson, and we never have, nor do we plan to. All right, so there is a public report that NSA read the emails of Fox News host Tucker Carlson, although NSA publicly denied targeting Carlson. I have serious questions regarding this matter that must be answered according to House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. That's what Kevin said. The NSA cannot use a political instrument, and House Republicans will ensure accountability and transparency, according to Leader McCarthy. Now, I want you to remember, please remember, Donald J. Trump, with his Department of Justice, they put members of Congress under investigation in the Intelligence Committee. They put their staff under investigation and their family members. All of them were connected to this DOJ subpoena under Trump. But McCarthy wasn't the only one demanding an investigation. Now, this is the definition of privilege. Matt Gaetz is the personification of sit your ass down. Matt Gaetz has come out to defend his good buddy. So during a House Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday concerning legislative possibilities to handle prosecutorial abuse of power when prosecuting leaks, Gaetz was provided a forum to address his good buddy Tucker Carlson's allegations. Let's go to this Matt Gaetz video.
I believe that the Department of Justice and the intelligence community shouldn't threaten or spy on members of Congress, our staff, or the press for politics. President Biden believes the same thing. The most watched cable news host has been stating for the last several nights that the NSA has been monitoring his communications. And amazingly, the NSA has issued a statement that is so couched, it is functionally an admission. But what's interesting is that there is no denial that they were monitoring Tucker Carlson, even if he wasn't the target. And I think that there was probably somebody in Tucker Carlson's orbit that NSA was monitoring, and there's no denial that they caught up Tucker Carlson in that monitoring. And by the way, there's also no denial that there was a plan to leak the information to try to, in some way, embarrass Tucker Carlson. The only denial is that they weren't expressly trying to get his show off the air. And so, Mr. Chairman, I am inviting you to continue this bipartisanship. Join me in calling for an Inspector General investigation into any monitoring that the NSA or any other element of the intelligence community has engaged in relative to Tucker Carlson. Because these denials, these couch denials, raise more questions than they provide answers.
See, they're telling you where their heart is at. They are literally more concerned about investigating somebody that may have looked at a Tucker Carlson email that wasn't connected to Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson wasn't the target of any investigation, and it may have been in the orbit of Tucker Carlson. They want you to investigate that, spend tax dollars on that, but they don't want you to find out what happened on January 6th. They don't want you to spend tax dollars to find out the terrorist connection to members of Congress for the insurrection at the US Capitol. No. They want to protect Tucker Carlson. Here's what the NSA put out as a statement. On January 28, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take his show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try to take his program off the air. You can read that in its entirety. Must I remind everyone of what Matt Gaetz did to his dear friend, Tucker Carlson, on live television? Here it is.
Again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there, and I brought a friend of mine, you'll remember her, and she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me, providing for flights and hotel rooms for people that you're dating who are of legal age is not a crime. And I'm just troubled that the lack of any sort of legitimate investigation into me would then convert into this extortion attempt.
I don't remember the woman you're speaking of or the context at all, honestly.
You was a damn lie, Tucker. You remember the dinner. You remember the context. He brought it up on your show because he wanted to remind you, for I don't know why, but he wanted you to know that he remembers, Tucker. And now all of a sudden, Tucker Carlson is under investigation by the NSA. Get real. My dear sister, what's your take with all this?
Well, it's politicians playing a game as usual and suddenly finding problems with issues that they've gone along with for multiple years. So we know that Republicans have been about the NSA. They've been about surveillance. We wouldn't have had the Patriot Act and all of these infringement of our civil rights if not for Republicans fighting for this after 9/11. And so you've got now all of a sudden, I would say especially over the last 4 years, the sort of victim complex that Donald Trump has whipped among the Republican Party, where the things that they have stood for and backed for a very long time is suddenly now a problem now that they're experiencing it. So now there's surveillance against them, and now they're the victims. And this is actually a similar argument that Donald Trump made, I don't know if you recall, just 3 months or 4 months into his administration, saying that Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, was responsible for unmasking people in his administration or people that were associated with Donald Trump, and trying to convince the public that the Obama administration had wiretapped his lines of communication. So a lot of this is them finally feeling that they have a sort of a nugget of an argument against the Democratic Party when these are things they've supported for a very long time.
You're right. My beef with both parties is that they both believe in big government. Let's be very frank about that. But as far as the intelligence and surveillance programs, Homeland Security was ushered in by a Republican president. We've had the consistent shredding or decreasing of our privacy rights for decades in this country, some voluntarily and others by force. But the issue remains These individuals who consider themselves patriots and for some reason are still able to pull off the narrative, let's look at what they are anti to now. They are anti-Capitol Police. They are anti the US military because of critical race theory. They are anti-intelligence agencies, but somehow they are still the party of law and order. It's amazing how they get away with that, but it's a massive public relations campaign. And I've said this for a long time. Republicans are so much better at messaging than Democrats. I mean, they would stick to it, especially when it's a lie.
Right, they're a party of power. I mean, obviously both of our two-party system, they believe in that. And Republicans just managed to whip up their base a little bit more with things that are just patently false. And they do that to maintain power. And that's not anything that should be, that's not news for us. But they wrap it and they couch it in these very noble terms that they are for the Constitution and for democracy and for freedom. Meanwhile, they're doing all these things to whip up their base in order to maintain power. And it doesn't even matter if they're being hypocritical and if it defies the things that they say that they're about, as long as they maintain seats in Congress, they maintain seats in their state legislative bodies.
Very well said. We got more on the other side. We're gonna go to a break. I got some news from Rudy Giuliani. I do have a question. Why is it that every time Rudy Giuliani talks to the press, it looks like he just came from a nap? We got more. It's indisputable.
I'm Nina Turner, and we are on the road to revolution, baby.
And I know sometimes people talk about the angry black woman, but I'm gonna tell you something. If you ain't mad as a mofo about what's going on here, something's wrong with you.
When people ask me all the time, what are the lessons from 2020, is that progressives have to get more organized and we gotta come together. We have to be as agile as neoliberals. The progressive movement has to understand that it's not just enough for us to have the right ideas. We are right on most of the ideas. We're not perfect, but we're 99% right, because it is a humanitarian agenda, but we must get the power. We have to come together in a more unified way so that we utilize our power strategically to topple neoliberalism, and it's gonna happen.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm new to TikTok, but about 3 years ago, I started my daily political news show, The Damage Report, because I noticed this trend where every morning I was waking up to this tsunami of news that was just generally dreadful and horrifying and shocking, and I thought that if I could spend my time helping people to navigate this, serving as a bit of a life raft, pointing out which news is important and why, there are worse ways to spend your day. We're not an average news show, and we don't want our TikTok presence to be average either, so feel free to let us know what you'd like us to do on the platform, and maybe give us a follow at The Damage Report.
All right, Amazon Prime members, here's how you can subscribe for free on Twitch. Start by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then click that little subscribe or resubscribe button below the stream on Twitch. Scroll down and select the subscribe free with Prime button, and then you're finished. Close out immediately and share your little subscription alert with the chat. Send a cute message along with it, and bathe in the sweet, twitchy, Bezos-funded love. Hashtag Bezos Bucks.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, who's real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Welcome back to Indisputable. Don't forget, make sure you are following us on social media, Indisputable TYT, Instagram, Twitter. Also, join us on the YouTube channel, Indisputable TYT. Indisputable TYT, free to subscribe, takes like 5 seconds. If you're watching me from somewhere other than that YouTube page, make sure you do a massive migration to their YouTube page ASAP, Indisputable TYT. Let me read some of these comments. TYT member Greyhound Dragon says, Dr. Richie, I noticed that you typically wear a pin on your lapel. I think it's called a lapel. It is called a lapel. If you don't mind me asking, what is it? Well, I do switch it up sometimes. Today is one of the universities I teach at, Beulah Heights University. I'm also a department chair at that college. But typically when I wear a lapel pin, it is either one of the colleges I teach at or it is representing organized labor unions, okay? Diana. Disgusting display of a cop abusing a black man who simply wanted to see his children. A situation where a social worker would have been the right person for a domestic situation. Police reform now. Agreed. Greyhound Dragon says, the look on the girl's face who was behind Gates, she knows Gates is a moron. That the look says it all. You peep that too. Super Chat YouTube, love your show. Kaden Pat says, love your show. Just recently discovered it, and I just recently discovered you. Thank you. Paterson Cop. Mbali says, I really need doctor to break this down. I am so tired of this toxic and deadly behavior. That is just convenient extermination. Yeah. Jonathan Oderick says, Andrasic says, yes, preach, doctor. If the crime rate goes up, then the cops are at fault for not doing their job. Yeah, we got a lot more. I don't have time to get to all of them. Insomnia North says, you deserve it, Dr. Rich. I hope they keep you on past the summer. Well, thank you so much for that. Okay, my next story. Rudy Giuliani has teamed up with a guy named Vernon Jones. Vernon Jones, lifelong Democrat who turned Trump supporter and then turned Republican, is now running for governor of Georgia. Vernon Jones is a black male. Well, the gubernatorial candidate Vernon Jones had to physically step in between a heated discussion between Giuliani and a CNN reporter. This was at an Atlanta fundraiser where Giuliani came to basically endorse Vernon Jones. Now, why is Giuliani endorsing Vernon Jones? Because obviously Vernon Jones is paying him. Giuliani needs money, and there's a money trail somewhere, I guarantee you that. So here's part of it.
Is a Democrat appointed by a Democratic county leader. If they had ruled for Rudy Giuliani or Donald Trump, Andrew Cuomo wouldn't have appointed them anywhere. They'd have been shunned in New York. Do you have any idea what happens if you support Donald Trump in a left-wing place? You lose your job. You have your children threatened. You have to move. I expected that decision. It's intellectually dishonest. They say I lied. They don't look at the affidavits I offered to them that shows I'm telling the truth. It's part of the cover, and it's part of the problem we have when we have a one-party place like New York. It's the reason we have so much crime. The crime is Cuomo's crime and de Blasio's crime. They run the state. They run the state like it's a dictatorship.
I want to step in for a second.
Okay, here we go now. Here comes the savior, Vernon Jones, to save his guy, Giuliani. Now, I want to remind you that Vernon Jones is probably more extreme than Donald Trump. I actually know Vernon Jones. I've had him on my radio show. There was a time in his political career he actually had common sense. His common sense is completely gone now, okay? Vernon Jones is a black Republican. I'm okay with that. We can have a good faith debate about policies. I have no issue with black Republicans other than policy, but I do have issues with sellouts. And here's what Vernon Jones said.
I want you to ask the Attorney General Garland. I want you to ask him, why is it that he wants to come to Georgia and investigate Georgia's so-called Jim Crow laws, but he won't investigate or even ask for a forensic audit in the 159 counties in Georgia? He won't even look at Stacey's law, how it was used in our elections versus state law. Now that's a fact, and that's an undisputed violation of the Constitution.
No, it's not. Vernon Jones, former CEO of DeKalb County, former state senator, former sheriff candidate, US Senate candidate. Every time he has run for office, he ran as a Democrat until he found a path to power through the Republican Party and becoming a Trumpite to get there. He's incorrect about the Georgia Constitution. He's also incorrect about the audits. Georgia went through multiple audits for the election. The Georgia Constitution does not prohibit individuals from voting by way of a voter box or a vote box, whatever you want to call it. There's no prohibition. The local board of elections, they're able to make these determinations by statute. The law allows it. Now they have changed the law to restrict voter access for black and brown folks, people that would normally work a 9 to 5, souls to the polls. All of that has been impacted, and Vernon Jones supports those policies that impact voter access for black and brown people in the state of Georgia. But they do something that's quite typical. I've heard almost every black Republican reference a slave term or a control mechanism for black people if black people disagree with them. You hear black Republicans say, if a black person votes for a Democrat, they're on the Democratic plantation. Well, here's the reality. When a Democrat is president, black people win economically. They get paid more per year based on household median income than when a Republican is in office. Unemployment rate drops more significantly when a Democrat is in office for black folks, and higher education access and high school graduation rates increase when a Democrat is in office as it relates to the black community. So there's a reason why black folks vote for Democrats. Now, here's what Vernon Jones said about black folks that watch CNN.
See, here's CNN. Because CNN is about controlling Negroes. That's what it's saying. Controlling Negroes. That's what CNN is about. They don't want people of color to have conservative thoughts. He's here to keep me running and keep me from being the governor of the state. Why? Because liberals, they do not want blacks thinking for themselves.
So liberals don't want black people thinking for themselves, but Vernon wants you to think like him, okay? Here's what's ironic about this whole thing. Vernon Jones, he said that he's here to stop me from running and becoming governor of Georgia. No, Vernon, they were there for Giuliani. They weren't even there for you. You were just the side dish. He was the main course. My sister, you know Vernon. Y'all are from the same county.
Yes.
Tell the truth.
I was raised in DeKalb County, Georgia, for which Vernon Jones was our CEO, which is kind of like the mayor, the chief executive officer. That's the only sort of executive administrative position that we have in DeKalb County. And speaking of misleading statements, he said that you're not allowed to have conservative views being a black person. And Vernon Jones, he was very outspoken as the sort of centrist conservative Democrat. He had a picture of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee on his desk. This was over a decade ago that this was out in the news. It was known that he held conservative views as a Democrat. So he had a photo of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. He voted for George Bush twice while he was the CEO of DeKalb County. And so the issue here, as you said, is not so much about his conservatism and not being able to espouse those views, because quite frankly, a lot of those views that he shares that he espouses are shared amongst a wide array of Black people. We're not a political monolith. We're not an ideological monolith. We run the gamut of being radical. I consider myself a part of a Black radical tradition. He's a conservative. And yet he was allowed to do that. But this is about being able to stand out, because you're not necessarily going to stand out and amass power doing the sort of typical centrist Democratic things that he was doing while he was in office. So he's making a political play, and this is a performance. So much of our national politics is about political performance and doing certain signifiers. And so he has his Make America Great hat on in the background. He's not talking about policy. He's just talking about, again, these things that will rile up people to go vote for him so that he can get support during the gubernatorial race.
Very well said. And I didn't mean to put you out there like that. And I must admit, I'm also from DeKalb County. I just wanted to feel safe after you said it. Okay. All right. Shifting gears. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would. Now, you know what we do. We go across the country and we highlight the Karens of the world, because Karens are dangerous. Meet the new drunk racial slur Karen. A Cincinnati woman says she and her 12-year-old daughter were shaken up after a drunk woman got in their faces and yelled racial slurs. She says the woman could barely stand and even appeared to be fighting with another woman who seemed equally as drunk, which is why she began recording. Let me take you to the first video.
Come and you go to jail. This is why. Child? Did I tell you you're trying to instigate something. Yeah, you are. And all these people here are witnessing it too. Here's the thing. You're intoxicated. You should probably go back over there and sit down. Intoxicated? And you're disturbing the peace to everybody. Here's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, you might want to back up. Here's the I don't give a about you or your child. Just stay there, Kinley. So go ahead and tell your friend to stay here. But the reality of it you're gonna go to today. Yeah. I'm going to jail for you or your. What did you just say? That's exactly what the I said. That's exactly what I said. Hey, stop. Who the are you talking to like that? Stop. Hey, stop.
She said, I'm not going to jail for you or your, and she spouted the N-word. Well, there's more.
There's a child over here. A child. A child. Yes, there's a restaurant. Tell me which right. I'm a mother. You're gonna get off me. Here's the thing. Walk away. I know more than that bitch. I know more than that bitch. And I know more than that bitch. Okay. You. I'm a grandma. Hey, you're about to go to jail. Here's your ride. Here's your ride. Jail, bitch.
Now, I'm sure when this Karen sobers up, she's going to say, oh my God, I'm not racist. I have Black friends. They will tell you. I'm sure she will blame it on the alcohol and say, I was intoxicated. Well, liquid courage to say what was already in your soul at first is what that was. Now, this Karen actually had consequences. According to the Boone County Sheriff's Office, this Karen was arrested for alcohol intoxication in a public place and second-degree disorderly conduct. She has bonded out of jail. And do we have a mugshot yet? All right, we don't have a mugshot yet. We've been looking high and low. If we can get it, we'll put it in post. Once again, this is insanity on top of insanity, but it is becoming so normalized in the tradition of how these Karens treat people they may disagree with.
Now, what's really confusing me is that she was talking to a white family. So she was talking to a white mom and her white child. And so if this is what she's saying, if this rolls off her tongue so easily to a white family, what is she saying about us?
Right.
She's doing this she's doing this very publicly with a crowd around. So I don't know, she was obviously very confused, but being able to use that language so liberally, even when it doesn't even apply, there's a certain amount of hatred, in my view, that has to be inherent in you to be able to do that.
Yeah, and what's quite interesting is that when you look at this historically, right, you look at bigots of the past, and they are very similar. There was a time when white people were called N-word lovers if they had friends that were black, or if they decided not to engage in racist activity. And also members of the KKK, the Ku Klux Klans, would target white people who were not down with their program of racism and attribute that same word to them. So what I see in this situation, my dear sister, I see a very similar ideology, that there's a disagreement, and instead of having an adult conversation or even an adult argument based on whatever the situation is, she goes and she has to racialize it somehow by dropping the N-word, where, I mean, damn, that's where you decide to drop the N-word. You decide to just show the world you're racist when you could have just been rude and disrespectful. But you had to do the trifecta. You had to be rude, disrespectful, and racist, which means you earn a spot on my show. That's what that means.
Yeah, where's the regular racism or the regular rudeness at anymore? Why we gotta add extra on top of it now? You could just let that go.
Yeah, quite interesting. All right, this is something that really should be investigated, but also should be a public movement against. Swimming hats. All right, I'm not a swimmer. I watch it sometimes during the Olympics. It's kind of exciting to me, right? I know how to swim, but I did not know a swimming cap or a swimming hat was such a big deal as it relates to the athleticism of the swimmer. So swimming hats for afro hair individuals is now barred from the Olympics as official wear. Because according to these officials, these folks, black people in particular, do not require caps of such size. It's called a soul cap, all right? Which is a swimming cap designed to accommodate diverse hair types. Has been denied by the regulatory body of Olympic swimming. And you see this graphic, you see come on now. How in the world is that going to give anyone an advantage inside of water? The swimming caps were barred by FINA on the grounds that to their best knowledge, the athletes competing at the international events never use, nor do they require to use caps of such size and configuration. The committee went on to describe the swim caps as unsuitable due to them not, and I quote, following the natural form of the head. Now, once again, this only applies to black women in particular with a bunch of hair. That's who it applies to, okay? Here's what the co-founders of Soul Cap said. Co-founders of Soul Cap say they are disappointed in this failure to acknowledge the diversity of competitive swimmers, particularly in a year where we have seen an increase in swimmers from ethnic minority backgrounds qualifying for the Olympics. Now, Soul Cap, brilliant idea, because they're right. You have more people of color swimming than ever before. It continues to go up every year, the number of people participating in this sport. That's a great thing. It diversifies the industry. Remarkable. Soul Cap was created in 2017 when the founders started adult swimming lessons for the first time. They met a woman with afro hair who was struggling with the size of her swim cap. Since then, the brand has provided 40,000 swim caps to swimmers globally. Here's what I really detest about this Olympic rule. It only adversely impacts women of a particular hairstyle. That's it. It's only people it will impact adversely. My dear sister, your thoughts?
This is a very clear example of what we would call cultural incompetence, because the denial of these swim caps isn't they didn't say anything about really how it will impact their performance.
That's right.
The statement that they said was that, well, our swimmers have never used it before, so why do we need it now? So they're hearkening back to the sort of sense of tradition when you've had a sport that traditionally hasn't had a lot of African Americans. So of course they haven't used swim caps of that size before. And the swimmers, now you're seeing more Black swimmers who are entering this field, and they're saying, actually, this is useful for me because our hair, for the most part, is naturally coily, so it's bulkier. And it is definitely very difficult to put inside of a swim cap. I remember this from my days when I was required to have swim lessons in college. And so we would have these headaches because you had to fit all of this hair, wrap your braids up, put it inside a swim cap, and it would actually cause you headaches because it would be so tight around the head. And so this is trying to resolve a problem so that their performance wouldn't be negatively impacted. It's not that it actually gives them an advantage. And if you see Black swimmers, Black women in particular, when they take their swim caps off, often they have relaxed hair. So essentially they'll have to go through a chemical process. When chlorine is already going to damage your hair, you have relaxers that damage your hair. And you're saying that this is the only way at the end of the day that they'll actually be able to use the standard swim caps is if they flatten their hair out through a chemical process. So I really do hope that they listen to the company, that they listen to women of color, specifically Black women who are talking about this, because it's really just a matter of ignorance.
Yeah, they need to get it together. My dear sister, I appreciate you. Malaika Jabali, tell people how they can follow you and get access to your remarkable work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashad. I am on Twitter, that is common, Malaika Jabali. You can see my name probably somewhere in the comment caption section for TYT, but most of my work is gonna be at Essence as a senior news and politics editor. So it's just essence.com/author/Malaika Jabali.
Beautiful, thank you so much for being on Indisputable. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, we got more on the other side. It's Indisputable, stick and stay.
We are onto something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate backed money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Just Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a betting. Absolutely not.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar, and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's plant your change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Yep, welcome back. It's indisputable. Let me read some of these viewer comments. We got a lot of them. TYT member Cajun Dragon says, please, Dr. Richey, give us more jokes about Rudy and what a doofus he is. Keep up delivering the greatest afternoon news show. That's indisputable. Well, thank you. Eileen, middle-aged dragon mama says, I would love Dr. Richey to have Matt Gaetz in the bullpen. Do you think Dr. Richey would finally lose it? No, I would love to have Matt Gaetz in the bullpen. Super chat, YouTube. Keita Boot Forever says, Doc, I know you don't want to, but you and Nina Turner in the Senate will push the needle where it needs to go. You articulate facts so perfectly. Well, thank you for that compliment. Nicole Smith, Vernon Jones has never been a Democrat. The proper title is Dixiecrat. By the way, love your show, Doc. You're right, Dixiecrat would be more fitting. About the swim cap, Ricardo the Lion-Hearted. If the white swimmers had or have guts, they would threaten to boycott swimming events. Well said, they're part of the same industry. You look out for your colleagues, right? Yeah. About the Karen video, Vanessa Maldonado says, she's intoxicated with whiteness. Yeah. Twitch. Karam Dio girl. I'm sure I said that wrong, but please accept my apologies. Even with our hair braided down, the regular size is still too small and the cap will come off. That's what the company was trying to solve for black women. And Insomnia Nora says, he totally just Kanye'd that press conference. He really did. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have a remarkable young lady on this show, Dr. Pamela Gurley. We're gonna talk about her book and some other issues impacting black women in America. Her book is I'm Not a Stereotype, I Am Her, HER. That was written in 2019. How mentally taxing it is to be a black woman in America. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Gurley, for being on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Let me first say this. Before you came on the show, I just did a segment about how swim caps made for black women have been banned by the Olympic Committee. Not because they give anyone an unfair advantage, not because it is a distraction for other swimmers, just because they don't understand it, basically. So once again, it just illuminates how cultural norms are biased against black women in particular, especially in sports like this. But let's talk about your background. Tell me why it's important to highlight the reality of being a black woman in America.
One, we are the most unrepresented, no matter how successful we are, no matter what we do. it's very difficult. I mean, a prime example is the caps. We want to protect our hair and take care of our hair just like we want to take care of our bodies. But we get subpar medical treatment, and if we don't advocate for the things that are important to us, then we kind of fail ourselves. We fail our communities, and we fail the young ladies that are coming up behind us. So I think it's important for us to be vocal and say what it is that we need to be represented and to have fairness and equity. That's my main thing. It's not diversity, it's equity that's very important for us to have. Equity and equality, and they are not the same thing.
I want you to speak on that, sister. I teach a course at the university, a policy course where we illuminate the life of Dr. King. And Dr. King, up until 1964, he was talking about equality. After 1964, he was actually talking about equity. Dr. King said it's one thing to sit at a table where you want to sit, it's another thing to own the restaurant. So he started to talk about equity. He talked about a universal basic income. He talked about owning land. He talked about equitable factors so that outcomes could be impacted. I want you to break down the difference between equality and equity.
So I think, first of all, I always say that when people say, well, what's the difference? You can always tell equity and the difference between equality when you look at the marginalized and you look at the wealthy. That right there tells you the clear difference between the two. The other part is when we ask for equity, and like you say, when you have that seat at the table, diversity can put you at the table, but the people around that table don't have to give you a voice. So what's the point? A diversity can bring you in, but if they're not going to give you equal pay, what's the point? You don't have equality. Equity will also get you places that equality can't get you. So I think that's important for people to recognize that there's a real clear distinction about having and then partially receiving.
I think that's well said. And we have been so confused about what equality is that we have accepted a model of equality that just is optically equal. That's it. The optics of it seem equal, but there's no actual outcome that's equal. The disparity is still present. So what has to happen for our Black sisters, our African-American sisters in America? What can I do as a man? What can this audience do as men and women? What can we do to help promote this agenda?
One, we have to speak up. Two, we have to advocate and not part-time advocate for it. I think that speaking up is one thing. This is why I decided to write books, not just to women, but for everyone. I've had, white women specifically and white men come to me and say, I want to read your book, but I'm not sure it's for me. And I always say the only way you can advocate for what Black people need is to be a part of the conversation, but understand what the conversation looked like in order to give a voice, have a voice, and be a voice.
Very well said. Very well said. I believe that racism, bias, prejudice exist on the spectrum. And there are some people who can be helped and there are some people who simply cannot be. And sometimes, especially with implicit bias, you're so unaware that if you are challenged through an experience, you can become aware. You can wake up from the slumber. How can people get access to your book and follow you?
So my books are really, all of them are available on Barnes and Nobles. My book, I Am Not a Stereotype, I Am Her, is at Walmart, and as well as Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. It's available overseas as well. You can also get all of my books on my personal website, which is www.unapologeticbydrg.com. You can look at my website. You can also get them there, and they'll point you to it, which is www.iamdrpgurley.com.
Dr. Gurley, thank you for being on Indisputable. Thank you for the fight you continue every day.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, up next, ladies and gentlemen, the bullpen.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey. Hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT? Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
All right, welcome to Dr. Rashad Richard Indisputable. This is going to be quite interesting. I don't know if you can handle this much truth on any day of the week. The unrest inside of the black community and communities that support them. It's because these cops are not held accountable. You have a family calling 911, and that family is expecting help, not expecting their loved one to be killed by the very people they pay to protect and serve them. Did you ever notice a cop that you work with call any black person the N-word or target people because they were black? Nope. But we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, crucify bad cops, brother.
Of
bad
course.
cops.
We don't need the government to step into our lives mandating that we should be wearing a mask.
You putting on a mask, Trey, is government intrusion. But you don't think the government telling a woman what she can or cannot do with her body it isn't government intrusion.
Where does life begin?
You want to go there? I can read it to you, brother.
You seem very well prepared. Certainly more.
Of course, why would I not be well prepared? They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform throughout this country, so I won't stop, and you won't stop either.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Welcome back to Indisputable. Let me read some of these comments. All right, Indisputable TYT, make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Also join us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Indisputable TYT. Super chat, Charles Massey says, you mean to tell me that white people not only think they own the water, but now they can tell us how to look in it? Well, not all white people, but the ones that sit on the Olympic Committee, yeah. Stefan Miles Cook, loving her perspective, and yes, doctor, what can we do? Well, she did break it down. Tracy Ravenhawk says she's right. Look at Serena Williams, the most disrespected athlete in the world. Chong Pak says, thank you, Dr. Richie. You make me choke on my bowl. LOL. Love every minute of it. Glad you said so. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the bullpen. In the bullpen today, we have Carrie Sheffield. Ms. Sheffield is a senior fellow at Independent Women's Forum. She has a long, extensive career in broadcasting and reporting, Politico and The Hill. She used to be a reporter for. Look up her bio when you get a moment. Ms. Sheffield, thank you for being on Indisputable.
Dr. Richie, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So today we're going to chop it up about CRT, critical race theory. So I do not want to presume what you believe about critical race theory. So let me just ask you, what are your thoughts about critical race theory?
Sure. So I from the very get-go, I just want to say I very much agree that we should teach unvarnished, take no whitewashing of history, truth, honest reconciliation about what our history is in America. And it's true, we have done a horrific job of treating African Americans as slaves. We should not shy away from controversial history, by no means. So I want to put that out there first. We need to go over it all, not just slavery, but also Jim Crow, segregation, all of it. My issue, though, is that I think that CRT takes it a step further and then basically rejects Dr. King's wish, rejects the idea that he said that we should look at each other by the content of our character and not by the color of our skin. And so that's where a lot of people, including myself, are pushing back, at least on the way it's being presented in schools today, which is to divide people based on race. That if you're white, you are inherently, no matter what you do, genetically, you are a suppressor. And if you are Black or Latino, or especially Black or any minority, you are inherently oppressed. I just think that that is toxic, and I think it's gonna trap people and it's gonna create a paranoia between the races at a time when we need to be coming together.
You know, I really do take offense when people misuse the word and the philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So what you just stated was inaccurate. Dr. King actually believed in the tenets of critical race theory. I will give you an example. Dr. King said that for Black people to gain an economic footing in America, the American government needs to do a massive social program known as universal basic income for Black people only. Why? Because he believed that the issue was no longer the individual racist in America, but in fact the system itself. And the system he was talking about in particular was the system of economy. And he said, in order to correct this system, you can't correct it by white people saying it's okay for you to eat at our restaurants or it's okay for you to stay at our hotels. You literally have to remedy the problem by way of a system approach. Dr. King also said in an interview with NBC after 1964 that his American dream had actually become an American nightmare. He also said, Ms. Sheffield, that he did not believe white Americans were as racist as they were. His popularity during the era that you're talking about was at 6%. The nonviolent Dr. King that you celebrate today, only 6% of white Americans had a favorable view of him. He talked about the system approach as it relates to the military and how the Vietnam War was a war that sent Black people off, Black children off to be slain, when domestically they had no respect at home. So when you take one excerpt from one speech out of context in order to apply it to a macrocosm of his philosophy, it simply doesn't fit. Dr. King believed that many of our challenges in the United States of America could be connected back to a system reality rather than just individual racist people.
Well, this is why I love having dialogues, and I appreciate you having me on your program to talk about this, because Yeah, I agree. We should absolutely debate. Dr. King is one of my heroes. I've read his books. The very last book, and I agree, you shouldn't just look at one speech. If you look at the very last book that he wrote, he delved into this question because you said that I am lionizing the peaceful Dr. King. He believed that until his death. He never believed in violence. He never believed in what we're seeing with the rioting and the burning down of predominantly Black neighborhoods by BLM. He rejected that explicitly. In the very last book he wrote before his death, he said that he was suspicious and he was angry and he disagreed. He said, I understand where they're coming from, but it's ultimately flawed. This notion of using violence to achieve your means. He completely rejected it. And that
Ms.
is
Sheffield.
And so I also want to.
Okay, hold on, wait a minute, ma'am. In all due respect, Ms. Sheffield, number one, we're talking about critical race theory, number one. You just started a whole new conversation about protest, then violence that does not connect to critical race theory whatsoever. There's no connector there. But since you want to go down that rabbit hole, I can go down that rabbit hole with you. There is nothing violent.
Absolutely, there are many. If you were to ask the BLM rioters, do you support critical race theory? There would be virtually zero people who would disagree with it. So absolutely, that the CRT was developed at elite universities, and it's been used, sadly, but to brainwash elite people to use their megaphones to perpetuate. Like, for example, I think I agree with you that there are white people who created systems that have suppressed Black Americans, and let me tell you who those people are. FDR, who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal. So
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, it's racist policy. But Ms. Sheffield, I have limited time on the show. I must address what you've said about violence, that Black Lives Matter, that they are somehow burning down their own cities. See, once again, that's the whole trickery that you all utilize in order to maintain your position. Black Lives Matter as a movement and Black Lives Matter as an organization, they have never burnt down any community. And I will ask you, how many members of Black Lives Matter have been arrested for terrorism? How many?
When you're talking about, I guess it depends on. How
many members of Black Lives Matter have been arrested for burning down their own communities? How many members of the group have been arrested for that?
That's called terrorism.
How many members of Black Lives Matter, because you said these are Black Lives Matter protesters engaging in violence. How many of them have been arrested for it?
Minnesota, we're talking about.
How many have been arrested, madam?
If you invite me back, I will give you a detailed list.
Okay, next time have your facts together before you come into the bullpen. The answer is zero. Not one member of Black Lives Matter has ever been arrested for destroying property or burning down a building. However, you have plenty of individuals who were connected to the terrorist attack that took place on January 6th that were connected also to what? Trump campaign, Trump supporters, Trump congressional people, Trump surrogates. Would you like me to blame you for what happened on January 6th? Or would you like me to blame the people that engaged in that activity only? Which one would you like me to do?
The philosophy of critical race theory is trying to pit races against each other.
No.
And that is not a philosophy
that is not correct.
Donald
What is
Trump
critical race
taught.
theory?
It is not a philosophy that I believe.
What is critical race theory?
Critical race theory is a belief that there is inherently oppressors and the oppressed. That no matter what you do, the color of your skin in America will put you in a camp.
That's not what critical race theory teaches.
That's what it teaches. I mean,
no, it does not. I teach, madam, I've been teaching critical race theory before it became a great evil for you all. I've been teaching critical race theory for 5 years. What you just said is inaccurate. That is not what critical race theory teaches. Critical race theory teaches that systems are biased against marginalized people. That's what critical race theory teaches. And you can de-emphasize individual racist people. In other words, according to CRT, if you eliminated most racist people in America, let's say all of a sudden, most racist white people woke up tomorrow and said, I am no longer going to be racist, right? It still would not change the inequity that exists connected to race, because the systems, as you have admitted on my program, the systems that exist are still in place. You admitted critical race theory on my show. You said these systems exist. Critical race theory only says you must analyze these systems so that you can find remedy to these systems. And that is the only way you will start actually creating equitable outcomes. But if you keep focusing on individual racist people without focusing on these systems, you will always have unequal outcomes. That's what it teaches. You agreed to that on this program, madam.
I agree to you that absolutely there are systems that were put in place by white liberal racists like FDR, like LBJ. LBJ was a racist. So it's really sad that
you want to politicize it.
No, I'm talking about the structures. The structures of
who wrote the Constitution? Were those liberals? Were those liberals that told me that I'm 3/5 of a man? Who wrote the Declaration of Independence that said Native Americans are savages? Who wrote that?
The 3/5 of a person was put in place by the North to punish the South because the Southerners wanted to have the full representation, and they said, no, we're punishing you because you have slaves. That's why they put the 3/5 because the Northerners didn't like slavery. The Southerners wanted them to be as full.
Here's the benefit that you have. You have a particular privilege. While you can argue and debate based on the nuances of what political party these folks subscribe to, I'm here telling you that as a black male, I do not give a damn what political party they belong to, because we have racist people that are Democrats, we have racist people that are Republicans, we have racist people that bear no party affiliation whatsoever. So their party affiliation means nothing to me. I'm trying to fight system oppression that exists in the United States of America, system oppression that you agree exists. So the question is, why are you not presenting a remedy to that systematic oppression?
Okay, let me go through, if I can go through some of these policies, because we're in agreement here. And my problem politically, and then I'll get into the systems. Politically, I think it's heartbreaking and tragic that the Democratic Party has used black voters and exploited them to keep the systems in place. Systems, for example, like redlining. FDR, a white liberal, was the one who created redlining. He did it after World War II. And the redlining is the precursor to what we see now, this system of rewarding bad teachers and keeping black and brown students trapped in failing schools. That was a system that was created by white liberals, and it's maintained by white liberals like Joe Biden and the leader of the National Teachers Unions. They're white liberals. Let me tell you another group in Hollywood. The Hollywood executives are white liberals. They donate to Democrats. They're progressive. They don't do, if you're a conservative in Hollywood, you are shut out. But guess who profits off the exploitation of black men and black women in Hollywood? White liberals. They're the ones who are creating the stereotypes of black men as criminals, of black women. They're the ones who profit all of this. So
let me ask you a question.
Let me tell you another system.
Okay, let me, ma'am, I don't have unlimited time. You got to make your points and then allow me to respond. As I said before, I could care less about their party affiliation. I put my foot up a Democrat as soon as I will put it up a Republican. So you got the wrong guy for that. I'm an equal opportunity individual. So let's be very clear about what you're saying.
Because most black voters, sadly, are not. They're being deceived by the Democrats.
Well, let me explain to you why black. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me explain to you why most black voters do vote for Democrats. When you take an analysis over the last 30 years of Democratic presidents versus Republican presidents, unemployment decreases significantly under Democratic presidents, and it actually goes up under Republican presidents by 2%. When you look at household median income increases by roughly $1,000 per year under Democratic presidents, and it actually goes the other way, goes in the opposite direction under Republican presidents. Under Democratic presidents, access to higher education increases, more black people go to college, more black people graduate from high school, more black people are able to get involved in trade and skills that are paid for and subsidized through government grants and programs. The question would be, why would black folks not vote for Democrats when they win economically, socially, politically, and educationally under their systems or under their policies? That is the reality. Those are facts that black people historically win under Democratic leadership more so than under Republican leadership. Now, does that mean Democrats do it all correctly? Hell no. No, there are plenty that Democrats should do more of. But I challenge you to name one policy that has changed the outcome of black Americans in the United States of America that currently is being championed by a Republican.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at the first 3 years of the Trump administration, because the fourth year was the wild card with the pandemic, for the first 3 years, and I believe this is why Black men and Black women both increased their vote for Trump from 2016 to 2020. That's a fact. Yeah. Not only Black voters, Latino voters, and Asian voters increased their margin for President Trump because throw out the COVID year, because that was a wild card, a 1 in 100 year event. The first 3 years, we actually saw the record-shattering wealth for Black Americans, wage increase for Black Americans, business ownership for Black Americans. So the policies themselves that Republicans through the tax plan, and we know the businesses who were hiring these Black and minority workers, they said they credited the tax plan that the Republicans passed for them to be able to hire more workers. So that's a big thing. Another, you mentioned education. President Trump signed permanent support for HBCUs every year under Democrats and Republicans. They had to come back and ask for more, but President Trump ensured that that would be in perpetuity in place, that funding that deserves to be in funding. So there's that. And also on the issue of immigration, I spoke to the niece of Martin Luther King, Alveda King. She said that what President Trump was doing on immigration, that it was helping Black workers. He said that she said that protecting our borders, it's a human right. It's a human right for Black US citizens or any US citizen to be protected against illegal workers who are coming in and flooding the market with illegal labor that suppresses the wages.
Allow me to respond. I will tackle the HBCU comment first. I'm a graduate of an HBCU. I lecture at an HBCU. You're incorrect about what Donald Trump actually did to impact HBCUs. Now, I will also say, to qualify my content, I will also say that President Barack Obama was no friend to HBCUs in comparison. All right, I will say that clearly, and I said it during his administration. What Donald Trump did was de facto defund HBCUs. He signed a proclamation that never got funded because he never fought for it in the budget. It never increased the overall budget of HBCUs. He then defunded HBCUs by proposing from the White House budget the elimination of something called the Federal TRIO program. Many people did not pick up on this because a lot of folks don't know what the Federal TRIO program is. The Federal TRIO program is a federal subsidy for what's called educational talent search and Upward Bound. Those programs are utilized in communities, primarily urban communities, where you have individuals who are trying to become first-time college students in their families. It is a lifeline between HBCUs and depressed communities all across America. He proposed to defund that program every single time, eliminating and reducing significantly the budget for HBCUs for that particular federal grant. That is a fact. Let me go to the employment issue. You talk about massive employment. The truth is the employment trajectory was moving in the right direction under President Barack Obama. And under President Barack Obama, you had more employment. It was a history record setting employment increase under President Barack Obama, and Donald Trump maintained the numbers, but then something happened in the job market. The Trump administration started using what's called a U3 rating system rather than a U6 rating system to talk about their job numbers. Not many people discuss it. A U3 rating system says if you work for 1 hour in this one survey month, the administration is going to count you as employed. A U6 rating system provides context to those numbers and says, if you work 1 hour, we're not saying you're employed, we're counting that as 1 hour of contract work. The U6 rating system contextualizes the data so that you know who has a seasonal job, who has a job that pays the bills, and who has a job that is a contract job that really they're not working any hours. But they did a trickaroo. They used a U3 rating system and then decided to proclaim that they were somehow fixing the jobs economy, and they were not. Here's the other reality under Donald Trump. More Black people were having to work multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. In addition to that, household median income fell under Donald Trump, and also home ownership with African Americans fell under the presidency of Donald Trump. And black people started to make less per dollar than their white counterparts for the same job with similar background and experience because the DOJ refused to prosecute open discrimination at major companies all across the country. So now you have black folks that were making up to 80% on the dollar of their white counterparts. It dropped down dramatically because of the DOJ's policy. So that's not a win for black people, but it is the way that Trump used it in order to promote his numbers. Third, let's talk about immigration. I'm glad you brought up immigration. Brown folks are not my enemy. You see, brown folks have never been the enemy of black folks. The number one job destroyer in the United States of America is automation. Automation is the number one job destroyer. But we don't talk about automation. We talk about poor immigrants. Well, explain this to me, Ms. Sheffield. Explain this to me. The same federal law that says it is against the law to work undocumented in the United States, that same federal law has a subsection that says it's against the law to hire them. So why do I see 600 brown workers being arrested at a warehouse, but I don't see the CEO being taken away in handcuffs? I don't see the hiring manager being taken away in handcuffs. I don't see the HR director being taken away in handcuffs. Why is it that I'm only seeing the people who were doing the daily labor being taken away in handcuffs when it's a violation of the same federal law?
Hey, I'm with you. These employers should not be hiring them, and they should be punished to the full extent. You and I are very much in agreement with that, absolutely. And the other issue, and I really appreciate that we're responding and we're having a dialogue about substance, because this doesn't happen. So I just want to thank you. So, but in terms of, like I said, go to the HBCU presidents themselves. There was statement after statement. And so yes, there might be some specific issues that you took that deserve attention, but overall that you heard from the leaders themselves, they were very grateful. And also the voters themselves, again, don't take my word for it. Look at the Black and Latino and Asian voters who voted for Trump at higher numbers than before, in record levels for the GOP. And look, it's nothing to write home about for the GOP. They have a lot more work to do, but I want to talk about a few other policies. That includes criminal justice reform, the First Step Act, that over 90%.
Well, let's do this. I'm running out of time, but I do need to point out that Mitt Romney got more black votes than Donald Trump. So you can't just say, oh, Trump magically had more black people.
No, Trump got a higher percentage both in 16 and 20 than Romney.
I checked that. I checked the data on that. Say that again.
I wrote about this for CNN and other places. Romney only got 5% in 12, and I believe it was 6% for. It was definitely higher for Trump in 16.
So you're saying
went up.
Okay, so Biden. I'm sorry, not Biden, but Romney got 5% from black folks, and you're saying Trump got 6% from black people.
Yeah, again, it's not things to write home about.
All right, I check it. Yeah, but go ahead. We got 2 minutes. I want you to have the final word. Go ahead.
Thanks, Doctor. Well, so as I was saying, it's not just the other issues we're talking about, the campus assault reform. So Obama put in these things that denied due process when anyone on a college campus is accused of sexual assault. And Trump said, we're not gonna let that happen. And the number one benefactor, according to a study of what Trump did on college campuses for people who are accused of sexual assault, it benefited young black men to allow them to have justice brought to them, because it's sort of the similar. I had one leader tell me that what was happening on college campuses, they ended up targeting young black men. It was like a Jim Crow era type.
All right,
policy.
we have 1 minute. Ms. Sheffield, can you explain to me quickly why the Trump administration decided to defund re-entry programs, halfway houses, and took away the Pell Grant program inside of prisons that absolutely helped individuals not engage in recidivism after release?
Well, I'd have to look at the specific details of that. I do know overall that recidivism and the First Step Act, and looking at what Trump did and his people, Jerron Smith, who's a friend of mine there, he worked with groups all over the spectrum. He worked with my friends with a number of civil rights organizations, Vernon Jones. They were for this. So I'd have to look at the specifics of what you're talking about, but I do know
and that's fair.
That it was something that was very much supported by many leaders on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely. And I wish they would have completed it by making sure the other variables, the wraparound services were in place as well. You can't take one step forward and then take 10 steps back on the policy and tell me it's a good thing. 0.02%, less than 1% of the black population was impacted by the First Step Act. That's just to provide some context. Ms. Sheffield, it's been a pleasure to have you on Indisputable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember a few things. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other, and take care of the planet. And remember, the truth is always indisputable.